What's up, guys? Welcome back to the WRPF podcast. I'm your host, Alex Uslar. Episode 38, 13 weeks out from the Ghost Clash. We got Lily Riley. Lily came out to the Ghost Clash 2. She showed out, and since then, she's just been fucking dominating, dude. You've been doing some sick shit. All right. So I'm excited to get to know you, hear your story. I know you've had an absolutely crazy journey. When I do these podcast episodes, I always got open powerlifting open. I'm a big numbers nerd and I like to talk about history, where you were when you started, where you are now. So I know we have a lot to talk about for your journey, but welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just dive into your history. Before you were powerlifting, what were you doing as an athlete? You started competing in 2017 when you were 21. So what was going on before that?
Yeah, I actually did my first competition in 2014. So I did two novice comps before I actually got started. So they wouldn't show on open powerlifting, I'm sure.
Fuck you, open
Um,
powerlifting. They screwed me and everything I had planned.
yeah. So yeah, I'm coming into my 10th year of powerlifting this year. But yeah, going back from like to where it all started. Um, so basically, like right from a really young age, I've always been on some sort of field or track or stage even, whether it's from like athletics. So I did a lot of athletics, whether it's track and field, cross country, netball, rugby league, basketball, swimming, dancing, cheerleading. I've done a lot, and
Jesus
everything that I've
Christ, you
done,
were
I've
active
been
in
somewhat good at as well.
from everyone that I've interviewed, I don't think
Sorry, you're breaking up a
anyone
little bit.
has said this many different sports and that many different things. So that's nuts. Okay. So which one were you the
Yeah.
most
So
focused on in your younger years?
definitely athletics and rugby league.
So when
And with athletics,
yeah, I have no idea what athletics is. We don't
with
say that word here in the US.
yeah, it's completely a different thing now. I couldn't even imagine doing it at this day and age, though. So with athletics, I was quite competitive in both track and field. And you know, if you're a runner, you're either long distance or short distance. I was quite competitive in both. So I was a sprinter, but I was also really good with cross country. Cross country, I did like state trials and sprinting. I think I just more so like our regionals. Um, so yeah, and then that's had a really good carryover to my other sports. So rugby league, I played that for 10 years, and also I played like representative football as well. So yeah, I've done okay with it.
So that was all through kind of high school, different sports, dabbling in everything.
Yeah, yeah. And then how I got into actual strength training, I was 14 years old, and I got my first personal trainer. And like any athlete, you strive to be the best at whatever it is. And with athletics, I was so competitive at everything, but the one event that I wasn't was shot put. And it kind of just hurt my feelings that I would lose that event every year. So it'd be the first 2 years of high school. So grade eight, grade nine. But also, mind you, I'm like 60 kilos at that stage, whereas everyone who would win that event a lot larger, and they've got that muscle behind them, that weight behind them. But I still wasn't okay with that. I wanted to be the best at everything, and that meant I had to get good at shot put. So I got a personal trainer purely just to get stronger and beat the bigger girls at shot put. So I spent a year working with this personal trainer, just doing a lot of throwing drills, a lot of weight training, just to develop that strength. And that next year, I came back and I won shot put by quite a bit. Because like all the other girls who were doing shot put, they didn't care about the sport. They'd just jump in and do it just because, you know, they're naturally good at that thing. Whereas I had to like work my ass off to kind of get there. So it was a little bit more rewarding. And then when I got to grade 12, I ended up getting the school record for shot put. So yeah, it was really cool. But that's where I started my weight training.
So in that kind of time, that's a long time ago, half your life ago. How common was strength training for females? You had to find a personal trainer outside of your grade school because I'm assuming that wasn't like in the curriculum. Lifting wasn't involved in grade school, probably for females, maybe for like the males on the football team or the rugby teams. But what did that kind of look like at that time?
Yeah, so we actually had like a really weird thing at our school. So in grade 11 and 12, we had so as I said, I was heavily involved with rugby league, and our school brought out this really weird class that was just dedicated to rugby league. So I joined that was, rugby league was a class. So I chose that as one of my subjects, and I was the only female in that class. Um, and I was actually talking to a client about this the other day, but all through school, I never saw the difference between me and the males. It was just, that was just something that I liked doing. And we started weight training during those football classes. Yes, it was very male dominated, but I didn't see myself any different to those guys. And, I just tried to keep up as best as I could with those.
So during those high school years, you had the personal trainer, you were weight training. What did that style of training look like? Did you know what the term powerlifting was? Were you doing the compound lifts? What was it like?
Yeah, no, not at all. I was such a bro trainer. Because I was like around all the boys and stuff. I was just trying to get like, that after school pump with them all as well.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, I was an absolute bro.
Hell yeah. So
Yeah,
at the time, obviously you used it. It helped you. It benefited you in your sport. But you
yeah.
didn't, at any of those times, did you realize like, oh shit, like I'm strong as fuck or I could be strong as fuck? Or it was assisting your sport. It was doing its job and what it needed to do.
Yeah, yeah. That's basically all I was using it for, is to assist whatever sport that I was doing at the time. Um, but then after school, I joined a new gym. I started dabbling in a little bit of powerlifting. I had no idea what powerlifting was, but I started dabbling with squat, bench, and deadlift. And I I remember I was 17 years old and I was squatting 120 kilos by myself. I was even watching YouTube videos on how to wrap your knees. So I'd sit in the gym by myself with a $20 pair of eBay knee wraps, wrapping my knees, walking myself out. And I think it was in those times when I kind of realized, hey, I'm actually quite kind of strong. So um, the following year, we just opened up so for context, I'm from a little country town in Queensland. So there's no powerlifting gyms. It's all just commercial gyms and whatnot. Um, there was two other powerlifters, like high level powerlifters, who lived in my town, and they saw me training and kind of just taught me or told me a little bit about powerlifting and just suggested that I do a powerlifting competition. So I started training with these two powerlifters, and I signed up for my first novice competition. Had to travel like 5 hours to go do this competition. I was the youngest competitor on the day. I was 18 years old. And yeah, I did really well. I squatted 130 kilos, benched maybe 65, and deadlifted 120. And mind you, I'm like 62 kilos at the time as well.
And so
So
this was you
yeah,
said 2014, right?
2014. Yeah.
So what was I love to talk is this is funny. The majority of our guests, my guests, were all kind of coming up from that same era, right? And powerlifting's changed, it's evolved
Yeah.
so much. And something I'm really excited to kind of get into is what the Australian powerlifting team or scene has looked like compared to the United States powerlifting scene. Because in around 2014, there was the Dan Bells, the Eric Lillibridges, there was all these like big motherfuckers, scary motherfuckers that everyone was looking at, watching on YouTube, getting into. So, what was it like over there in Australia? Were you guys watching a lot of
Yeah.
the Americans? Big Dog started at some point a little bit after that, I think. But what was the kind of that scene like there, and what were you looking at, and what were your friends or these guys that were teaching about powerlifting looking at?
Yeah. Well, like when I first got started, like the biggest events were Pro Raw, which were held at the Arnold Classic. Um, So that used to be like my main focus. I just absolutely idolize all the lifters who were lifting at Pro Raw. Um, and yeah, same thing with big dogs. We had that was heavy in Australia as well. So now looking back, I just remember like how much I would absolutely idolize these people, let alone I'm kind of up there with them these days. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
during that time because you guys had these big competitions. When I talk to people like from the UK, other places, there wasn't as much, but it really seems like powerlifting and even raw powerlifting was pretty big over there at that time.
Yeah, it was pretty big, yes.
So had to travel outside of your small town, go to these different competitions. 2014, you do that first competition, squat 130 kilos in eBay knee wraps. Fucking sick.
Yeah.
Well, you haven't taken off the goddamn knee wrap since then. We'll get into that in a little bit, right? So
Yeah.
what was your training style like? You were fortunate that you had a gym background. You met people who were familiarized with the actual sport of powerlifting. How did things shift going from that bro style training to actual powerlifting in those early years? And then we'll talk about how it evolved.
Yeah. I mean, I was self-coached for a couple years after that, and it very much still was very bro training. Um, my training kind of looked like maxing out every single session and then just going hard on my accessories. Um, it was basically the same thing for 2 years straight, just maxing out, going as hard as I could. I think back then, that's how you think you get stronger, is just lifting heavy ass weights every single day. Um, yeah, that's basically how it looked like. And then in 2017, I got my first coach, going into like first proper coach. Had a lot of help along the way, but got my first set in stone coach, going into my first sanctioned meet, which was an absolute game changer. Had a little bit more structure for the first time. Um, he was a high level powerlifter as well. And I basically just did everything that he did, ate like him. I just mirrored everything that he did, to be honest.
Well, so that gets us to where things started on open powerlifting. So those other competitions that you did, and during that time, it's a long time you were actually
Yeah.
competing in powerlifting over 2 years, but they were unsanctioned. Is that because it was just such a small town, kind of small competition area, and you had to really travel for these actual competitions, or what was that like from like a federation standpoint?
Yeah, well, I think it was just that whole thing. I'm not strong enough. The people that I trained with were already elite. So I just thought I'd have to do another novice competition just before I can catch up to them. Because they're like, the people that I'm training with, they've got like 300 kilos, 400 kilos on my total. So I'm just expecting everyone was the same, which obviously we learnt it's not like that. But yeah, so I just gave myself a little bit of time before I jumped into a sanctioned meet.
So you get a coach, you sign up for this states meet, you go, you compete 9 for 9, first actual competition. At that time, you came from a competitive background, right? You played sports. You always wanted to be the best. So were you from early on, you're like, I want to see how far I could take this. I want to be one of the best and I'm going to keep pushing. And at what like point did you realize like, damn, I might be able to actually do this?
Yeah, I think, like as you said, I've had a very extensive athletic background, and it doesn't matter what I do. I know that I want to be the best at whatever I do. And I think from very early on, I've had really strong belief in myself. And I've always had this feeling or something in me that I'm going to do something big. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be something big. And I don't even care what sport it's going to be, but I'm going to be the best. And, powerlifting just ended up being that thing. And yeah, so from very early on, I'm like, I'm going to be the best, or I'm going to make it big in this. And like even right now, I haven't even come close to making it. Yeah.
Well, it's crazy how
That makes
far the
sense.
sport has, no, 100%. It's crazy how far the sport has come and how things have changed because we didn't even talk about your stats, but
Yeah.
7 all time at 181, a class that has just increasingly gotten so goddamn competitive. Put up a 606 dots at your recent
Yeah.
competition. Before
Yeah.
it would have made you one of the best ever. You know what I mean? Um, Especially when it was
Yeah.
of Wilkes, up until a couple years ago. Um, so through those first couple of competitions, you're competing quite a bit back to back throughout 2017 into 2018, right? Continual making progress, making your way kind of in the Australia scene, and then competing at your first Pro Raw or Pro Raw sanctioned meet, right?
Yeah.
So what was that kind of shift like going from just competing at a state, this is your first actual meet, to within 1 year competing at Pro Raw?
Yeah. I still remember that first meet like it was yesterday. So the year prior, I remember, so Pro Roll was held on my partner's birthday and he was having a massive party. Everyone was out the back, like drinking and whatever. I was in the lounge room. I had Pro Roll on the TV and I was streaming it. And I was in absolute awe. Like there's women squatting and deadlifting 200 kilos, benching 100 kilos. I was in absolute awe. Like I just thought it was absolutely incredible. Um, so for the following year to actually get an invite to be up against, the best in Australia, it was, I don't know, it was the best feeling in the world. So I remember being at the competition and like I wasn't in it. I'm not competitive there. I'm just another number there. But I stood back, took in the day. I was just watching everyone else. Like it was absolutely incredible.
So that's 2018. You compete at that first Pro Raw. Let's talk about kind of weight classes and that evolution. You go from 148, you grew out of that, you go up to 165. How tall are you?
I'm 172 centimeters,
Oh, fuck my life.
which is like 5'7".
Okay,
5'7".
cool. I was going to say, none of us know what you're saying. We should probably know,
Yeah,
because
sorry.
you guys are doing it right. Here in America, we're fucking weird, but okay, 5'7". So you're not short,
Yeah, 5'7".
So you have to kind
I'm
of
not sure.
you have to keep growing into these different weight classes. So 165,
Yeah,
Pro Raw 5, then 2019 competing in Pro Raw 6, right?
yeah,
Through these years, because then now we're about to kind of get into, a big turning point in your life and why there's a break from competition and competing, right? Through those years before that, that
yeah.
2017, 2018, 2019, who are you looking at? Like, social media is very prevalent at this time. All kinds of people on social media. You watching the American powerlifting scene. Obviously, Australia was nothing to, back off at. Australia had a huge scene as well. But kind of what was your motivation through this period?
I've never been someone to kind of, really like just focus on someone else's progression or whatever they're doing. I'm all for myself. I don't know, like obviously there's the Steffi Cohens and people like that I absolutely idolize and still do. At like 2019, got to compete with her at Pro Raw. Yeah, I don't know. I've been very heavily invested in more males, to be honest. So I've watched like all of the big dogs. Absolutely loved just watching them like throw around weight that doesn't even sound realistic at all. Yeah, I don't know. I've been very just more involved in my own progression than anyone else's.
I love it. And a lot of our listeners, we have a lot of younger listeners and people who hear us kind of talk about some of those earlier glory years where powerlifting was kind of getting really big, and watching big dogs was such a fucking highlight for me. Granted, I'd have to be up at
Yeah.
3 or 4 a.m. watching it because we're in two
Yeah.
completely different worlds and stratospheres, but I would be up in the middle of the night with my wife sleeping next
Yeah.
to me, 2017, 2018, watching big dogs, and absolutely legendary. So that's what's so cool to me is how, although
Yeah.
we're on completely two different ends of the earth, it's like two such cool different scenes for powerlifting. And I think in these most recent years, with how things have grown, it's been really cool to see the world start to collide and have a lot of Australians come over to the
Yeah.
US, where it used to kind of just be a couple of the select few Americans going over there for some of these events that were just unreal.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like it's me getting the opportunity to go over to Ghost Clash last year. That was an absolute game changer. Um, just like I learned so much as a competitor, just being around like high level athletes that you don't get to clash with as much over here as well. Um, but yeah, the new era of powerlifting is ridiculous.
It's nuts. So let's
Yeah,
talk about that competition, Pro Raw 6 in 2019, then a gap in your competition history, COVID obviously hitting Australia, but also you getting diagnosed with cancer.
yeah.
So what was that like?
I don't know why I'm laughing, but it's just crazy that yes, it was all during COVID as well. So I was actually prepping for a competition, which was Pro Raw, which was held in March, and that prep was looking to be my best prep ever. I was hoping to do my first 500 kilo total at the time, and unfortunately, Pro Raw got cancelled because of COVID. And then we decided, so at my gym, our director decided to run just like a little local meet for all the Queensland lifters who didn't get to compete at Pro Raw, just so that they could all finish their meets, just at a little local comp. And I went in, did my weigh in, everything like that. Everything was looking good. And straight after weigh in, I just couldn't do my refeed. I couldn't hydrate. I was getting this really bad pain in the left side of my body. And I started getting really sick, throwing up. I was in agony. I started getting like really lightheaded. I was super dizzy. And stupid me or competitive me is just thinking that this is all from the weight cut, because it was a pretty aggressive weight cut. Um, yeah.
I wouldn't
So
even say
I was
stupid
just
you.
blaming it all on my body.
That's what most people would think. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this is some crazy
Yeah.
strong weight cut. It happens to correlate with that. Right.
Yeah. Well, it was just the timing of it. Like, and I just couldn't do my refeed. I was struggling to drink water even. So it was a few hours into it and I couldn't stay awake. I've never been so tired in my life. Like, you know, when your eyes just get so heavy that you can't open them.
For sure.
I was like that on my lounge room floor. So I slept for a few hours and I woke up in a panic that I haven't done any of my refeed yet. And I rang my mum, just going over like the symptoms of it. And I was like, oh, I've got this pain in my stomach and in my back. I don't know what that is. And yeah, so she suggested I should go up to the hospital. And I was like, I'll give it a little bit more time. I'll try and drink water or whatever I have to do just to try and make myself feel a little bit more like a human. And it just wasn't happening. I couldn't do it. So my partner drove me up to the hospital and we did like I think we just did a blood test at this stage. And the nurse tried to tell me that I had a UTI. So they put me on antibiotics for a UTI, sent me home with like pain medication and stuff as well. I tried to go to sleep and the pain medication worked pretty well. So I actually got a decent sleep with no pain. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I woke up in absolute agony. Like I was screaming, holding my stomach. And my partner just woke up and he's like, all right, let's take you to the hospital again. As I was leaving my bedroom, I was just spewing everywhere. We got to the hospital, took me straight into the room, did a few more like tests and stuff. I went to what actually made me stop and realize that something was wrong is I had to do a urine sample. And it was an absolute shock. But I did my urine sample and I looked at the container and it was just full of blood. And I was like, what the fuck? Like that was the first time I was like, okay, maybe something isn't right, because I'm still blaming it on the weight cut here.
And they didn't do it the first time you were there. They only did it the second time you went to the hospital.
Yeah, they only did it the second time.
That's fucked. They should have done that the first time. That's
I know. And so much of me wants to go back and talk to that same doctor or nurse. And I just want her to know what it ended up being. Like it was cancer, it wasn't a UTI. But yeah.
fuck.
Anyway, so yeah, we spent quite a time in hospital. In total, I was in hospital for roughly a month, and it was hard. It was the hardest part about it was all during lockdown, so I couldn't have anyone coming up to visit me. Like the one time that you want people there, you want support. It was very isolating in there. My mum, so you could always have like one person in the hospital with you. So like my mum and my partner would just take turns in the waiting room and then take turns coming to see me. Or yeah, it was hard, but yeah. The diagnosis ended up being so stage 2 renal cancer. So I had a 12 centimeter, so it was that big, 12 centimeter tumor growing on the inside of my kidney. So the only option was to remove the tumor in my kidney. So my kidney, I probably had very limited kidney function for a very long time, and I had no idea. So I looked at the MRI and my kidney was like shaped like this. It was just so stretched because of the tumor itself. So talking to doctors and nurses, I've probably had that tumor growing for a couple of years and I just had no idea. It was such a slow growing tumor. But like after reflecting on the prep and the year prior to my diagnosis, I had so many signs and symptoms, but like, especially as an athlete, you get all these niggles and I feel like you know when something's wrong and when you can push through it. And I just assumed I've just got a little bit of back pain there, but it's not stopping me from lifting. So it's fine. So yeah, it was very, very unexpected. The treatment ended up being, so take the kidney, take the tumor. And yeah, so during the process, I lost a lot of weight. So for reference, for the competition, I did a weight cut from 80 kilos and I think I weighed in at 74 kilos. When I left hospital, I left at like 61 kilos. So it was, it was a lot. I think that was the hardest part is I had no idea how much weight I had lost until I got home from the hospital. And because I was in the gown the whole entire time. And when I got home, I looked at myself in the mirror and it was my first realization that I'm sick. Like I just looked at myself in the mirror and I just bawled my eyes crying. And that's when I kind of realized how much I had actually lost during the process. It's like as an athlete, your sport is your identity. Your body is your identity. Like that's what I, create all of my craft with. And I lost all of that. So yeah, that was tough.
That's so terrifying. I can't imagine anything that can compare to that. I mean, my mom had cancer a couple years back and being there with her and for her, through all of that. I think that it's very fortunate because you're fully cancer free 3 years. It's very fortunate that having it that long, it didn't spread anywhere else and it was super isolated to the kidney, correct?
Yeah, so that's actually crazy because so with the cancer that I had, usually it will spread after the tumor is past 7 centimeters. Mine made it to 12 centimeters and didn't spread. That's an absolute miracle. Absolute miracle.
That's nuts. That's so crazy. And I can only imagine how scary that was going through that and then getting home, kind of that realization and the kind of that delayed realization, right? But I guess maybe in a sense it's better than being in the hospital and having that realization, being home. But regardless, you having it is scary. And not to mention you're there for a month, but you're still in the middle of COVID lockdowns, right? This is still middle 2020, and Australia was crazy fucking lockdown for a very long time.
Yeah, yeah. So and it didn't actually sink into me that I was going to be out of work. So all the gyms shut down for roughly 6 months as well. So and that's my job. I work in a gym. So I didn't get to like stew on that I lost my job because I wouldn't be able to work anyway. So it was like once I got out and like let that sink in, that it even affects online coaching because all around Australia, no one can work,
Right.
train. Yeah. So thankfully during that time I had a GoFundMe page. I really did not want to accept it. I hate handouts. I hate anything like that. But I don't think I would have got by without it as well. Yeah, I was very thankful for that.
That's insane, dude. So take me through after that process, the realization, the acceptance, you looking at yourself like a shell of who you used to be, feeling defeated. How did you turn things around and where did things start turning around from there?
I don't know. I, I don't think I actually came to terms with what I went through until maybe like 6 months after, because I tried to just jump back straight at it straight away. And like, I know that I had those feelings deep down that it absolutely sucked, but I was in denial for so long. Um, I'm that type of person who kind of pushes my feelings to the side and just tell myself it's fine, it's okay. Very optimistic person. Um, and unfortunately, the cancer was one of those things. I'm like, okay, the tumor's out, the kidney's out. There shouldn't be any issues now. I'm fine. I did go through a lot of like work with a physiotherapist and my coach, everything like that, like dietitian, and to try and get me back to where I was. But I never sat back and like processed what I went through, and which I'll get there later, like why that was an issue. I was in just such a rush to make a comeback. So like 2 weeks after my surgery, so I was told not to do anything for like 6 weeks after my surgery. And I was playing around with dumbbells like 2 weeks after, just because I was in such a rush to get back to it, I guess. And yeah, no, not ideal, but I was so impatient. I needed to get back to it. And it was like 6 months later, I had an absolute mental breakdown. And I'm someone, I've never experienced like depression. I've never really been sad. I don't cry over anything. It takes a lot for me. And I had this mental breakdown. Like I just couldn't stop crying and I couldn't figure out like what was wrong. And I was trying to tell myself, why the fuck am I crying? I'm fine. Like what is wrong? And I couldn't figure it out. And like it got really bad. We went on for a couple of weeks. I canceled clients. I canceled like appointments. And I just stayed in bed and cried. But I couldn't figure out what it was or what was happening. And at this stage, I'm still not talking to anyone. No one knows I'm going through this. And I went in to do one of my physiotherapy sessions. And and during that session, I couldn't help it. And I just started crying. And talking to him was probably the best thing I had done for myself. And he had just made me realize that I hadn't really talked about what I went through. I hadn't really sat and processed what I went through. Fucking sucked. And I'm just here trying to say, it's okay. Like I'm fine. And yeah, so it hit me hard then. And that's when I kind of had everything like processed and whatnot. I talked to more people. It helped a lot. And then that's when I felt like I was semi-okay to start, easing back into powerlifting and stuff. Yeah, it was such a mental shift for me. But during all of that, I learnt so much about myself. Like I had no idea that's how I handled emotions. And I'm not like that anymore. I'm happy to talk to people about my thoughts, my feelings. I sometimes overshare now, and I'm happy to cry in front of people. I'm not embarrassed about it. Yeah, and that's why, like, one of my biggest things I always say is I'm thankful for what I went through. It's made me into a better person. Yeah, like hard things do create strong people, and I really found a lot of value in my journey with cancer.
100%. And even the time in your life when that happened, you're 24 years old. When you're 24, you're an adult. But through our 20s, we're still figuring out so much about ourselves, we react. We're learning lessons from fucking over people, doing people fucking us over, all kinds of shit's happening. So at that point, as a young adult, there's so much shit going on. So sometimes it's a small event, sometimes it's a huge event, and sometimes it's just how the cards fall of figuring out how we are and how we fully come into ourselves. But it's crazy, that it was that kind of situation. And also, I can totally see how, the human brain can process it the way that it did for you, but how it just kind of
Yeah.
had to boil over. It had to become a boiling point. A lot of things you said remind me a lot of my wife and how she has in the past and learned to kind of regulate her emotion, and everything from her stubbornness of after she had a C-section when she had her baby, she was not even supposed to go upstairs and she was on the Peloton and doing dumbbells like 3 days out of the hospital. I'm like, what are you doing? Because I'm the complete opposite. But it's like we have to learn on our own terms and figure things out on our own terms. And I could definitely see how that, helped form and create, the present you today. And, it's just crazy how that happened. And I'm so glad to hear how that journey ended and brought you now to the bigger, better, stronger version of yourself after all that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So 2021, things start opening back up in Australia, right? You're about a year or so removed from all of that. You get into your next competition, you continue competing, you hit that goal of that 500 kilo total, right?
Yeah, I did. Exceeded that.
Hell yeah. So take me through then those next couple of years. You're back to competing. You've gotten over all of that. Are we at that point yet now? Is it after everything you went through and now coming back even bigger, stronger, and better that you start realizing maybe I have what it takes to kind of push towards being the best? And take me through those next couple of years to coming over into here to the US and competing over here.
Yeah. So that first competition back, it was actually really tough. So it wasn't my best comp. Like I didn't get the numbers that I had hit in training. Like I undershot it a lot. And I was actually quite a mess that day. Like I thought, and again, like as I was talking, my thoughts and feelings and everything like that, when I was there. So this is weird. I didn't think this was an actual thing, but when you see in movies and people are having just those flashbacks about like, their hardships or whatever it was. And I felt like I had that on my comp day. So when I'd be sitting there trying to like listen to my music or trying to channel in, all I would think about is me screaming in agony in the hospital bed, like pushing my emergency button, waiting for like help. And I don't know if just it's trauma that it just really stuck with me on that comp day. And I know that got the best of me for that competition. So going into my next one, that is something that I just tried to really, really work on. I did a lot of self work leading into that next one. So I felt like it just got better and better as we went. It hasn't really clicked to me until maybe like the last 2 years of competing that I've got what it takes, I guess. Like coming back into it, I wanted to be competitive just in my country. And then now in these last couple of years, I've slowly building my way back up there. But now I'm like, okay, now I'm a little bit more competitive on the world stage.
Hell yeah, definitely. So take me through these last couple of years. You've always competed in wraps. We'll get into wraps versus sleeves in a second, but you were doing that 165. You were making that cut, that huge cut that you had done, before going into the hospital, after going to the hospital. I could see how that first competition back was triggers and trauma because the last time you had done that, you had been there. It had been in the same scenario. Continue to cut. Then you go up to 181, right? Do a couple meets at 181 before trying to go back down to 165 for the Ghost Clash, and maybe wasn't the best decision.
Yeah. 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 So if we look at, I think it was 2022, that's when I started doing all the back-to-back competitions. It was never the plan. It just kind of felt that way. In April 2022, I did 3 competitions. So that was a massive month for me.
That's
I did
I didn't even put that math together. That's crazy. And hey, you still
so
progress your total every single comp. So
well, we played it safe. So the whole idea was to do two meets. So it was her raw and pro raw. I think they were 2 weeks apart. The her raw, I did it very conservative because I knew that I wanted to go bigger and better for pro raw. So I played it a little bit smart. So I was recovered well enough. And when I did pro raw, I think I finished my squat at 230, and it was such an easy squat that my coach was like, I know that you've got so much more there. If you want, you can do GPC states next weekend. And, I felt really good after competition, so I thought I'd jump in and do another one. And the whole plan was to get GPC Australian record at the time. So that's why I did that. I think so for pro roll, that's a 2-hour weigh-in. And I think I did 75 kilos class then. So that's a 2-hour weigh-in. I was still pretty comfortable, but I spent the whole entire prep in a deficit as well. So it was good to spend a week like eating into the next one. And doing that competition was like my first competition not in a deficit. Like I actually got to eat into it as well. So that's when it kind of clicked that I'm like, how much better would I be if I got to eat in a surplus in a whole entire prep? So that's the main motive for the next competition. I just spent, trying to fill out the 82 kilo class.
and within just 5 months, you add another 80 pounds to your total, and the next competition still there in 2022.
Yeah. It just, and yeah, so I that whole year. So after GPC States, I also was training for a Highland Games competition. So I competed in Highland Games. So it was a completely different sport, but I've got a background of throwing and everything as well, but it was a whole different thing that I had to learn how to do. So I did Australian Nationals and came second in Highland Games, completely different sport that I've never done before. And then, I continued to throw like 1 to 2 times a week during my whole prep for the next one as well, for the next other competitions at the back end of the year. And then I did another Highland Games competition in New Zealand as well. So I was Oceania champion in that as well.
I love it. So this is all end of 2022, been making leaps and bounds. At some point around there, boom, you get a DM from the Ghost Clash, you get an invite for the Ghost Clash, right?
I wish you saw my reaction. I was like screaming and sending screenshots to everyone.
Hell yeah, I love it. It was so exciting for me because I've been a part of the pro powerlifting scene here in the US since, 2017, 2016. And we've always had, handfuls here and there of international lifters coming over. But one of my main objectives for Ghost Clash 2 and now looking at Ghost Clash 3 is to have as much international competition as possible. And the amount of competitiveness that we have internationally right now is more than it's ever been, So that was really cool to see, all the Australians, the different people stoked about it. So going into that, what was your mindset like? Like you've been competing at one of the highest levels, the highest level essentially in Australia, but now things are completely changing. You're going to travel 24, 30 hours to get over here. What was that like?
Yes. Well, and I think I've got the same thought pattern going into this year's Ghost Clash, but knowing that I'm less competitive on this stage. I'm not going to rank like top 3 or anything like that. So I just wanted to use it as like an experience more than anything and just do the best that I can. And as I said, I'm going to do the exact same thing this year. Like the girls who are looking like winning, their dots we're looking at maybe like a 700 dots this year. Like we don't know. That's going to be absolutely ridiculous. So I'm just happy to be there, clash with the best, and yeah.
And I think I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it pushes you to another level, right? You're not just there showing out and being the best. You're the person that people are like, oh wow, I've never heard of this girl. Wow, this girl just squatted 600 pounds. Some people will notice it, but other people won't give a shit because there's people opening at 650, 660. It's crazy how much the sport has grown and the competitive side of things has grown. But so with Ghost Clash 2, you went back to 165, and since then you've been doing 181. What's your plan for Ghost Clash 3?
Yeah, so I think I've just come to an absolute decision that I'm more competitive in the 82 kilo class. Now I'm trying to, I haven't quite filled it out properly yet though. So that's my main motive is I'm sitting at like 80 kilos now. I want to try and get up to 85. I'm in a pretty hard surplus at the moment. So I want to build up as much as I can. And then if I have to cut into the 82s, I will. But I don't want to do a ridiculous weight cut. I care more about my performance and the number that I lift on the day. And if I'm not like super competitive, like with dots, with like the top three, I just want to do as best as I can. And sometimes that might mean just not sacrificing my performance with a weight cut.
100%. Dude, you'll be jacked as shit. You're already super fucking jacked. That will be crazy to see. I'm super excited to see it. So, something else to touch on. You always historically competed in wraps. Reasoning why you shied away from sleeves? Have you ever dabbled in them? Do you plan on dabbling in them?
Yeah. Yeah. So the whole sleeves thing isn't that big in Australia yet. So, like in America, you've got two different divisions with sleeves and wraps. We don't have that over here. So, sleeves are up against wraps. So, I don't really have a choice. And if I'm wanting to be competitive against everyone else, I've got to use knee wraps because everyone else is using them. Um, I haven't played around with like sleeve stuff too much. And I just get so much out of a knee wrap. Like I've got like 50 kilos difference between my sleeves and my wraps. So yeah, and I've got a goal of hitting 300 kilos and I'm obviously going to need knee wraps. I might even do like a sleeve competition soon, I guess. Like it's going to have a good carryover, but yeah, I get so much out of knee wraps. So I like them.
There, I like it. So, with that
Yeah.
being said, big goal, 300 kilos. What are your overall short term? You just said it for the Ghost Clash. The goal is to go in there, do the best you can, and have as much fun as possible. But beyond that, what are some midterm, long term goals that you have?
Yeah. So currently the all-time biggest squat in Australia is 290. So I think it'd be really cool if I could get that. And that's done by like a super heavyweight powerlifter. Um, it would be cool to try and get close to that, but no one's come close to that record for like 5 years. And then now all of a sudden there's like three of us who are pushing it pretty close. So it's just going to be a race who gets there first. I did have in the back of my head that I wanted to try and get 290 or 292 by Ghost Clash. I don't know if it's going to be there, but if it is, cool. I am patient, so I'm happy to wait. Like I trust the process. So that'd been my number one. I've almost got the biggest squat in the 82 kilo class. Currently it's 282. So this is for Australia. It's 280, so I'd like to get 282, the biggest female squat in the 82 kilo class in Australia. One like those things, maybe I'll just looking at just going up the rankings a little bit more in the 82 kilo class worldwide.
I love it.
But yeah,
I'm excited to see it.
yeah, I do have goals and stuff for Ghost Clash. I think I could do my first 250 deadlift, 130 bench press. And I'm not going to overshoot my numbers for squats. I do have a history of squatting high, so I've got to try and I take that into account every time as well. So I don't like to put numbers in my head because I'm just going to disappoint myself. But I think I should be good for a 280 squat.
And that's where things also differ when you come to international stages, completely different judging, different standards across different, just how things are. So it's all about adapting, right? Seeing your environment. And I'm excited to see it. We're 13 weeks away. tons of time to keep bulking, tons of time to
Yeah.
keep prepping. I'm excited to see you again in Miami.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Can't wait.
Hell yeah. Sign us out. Let everyone know where they can find you on social media. And thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Lily Riley Coach, and that's pretty much the exact same thing on all platforms.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on. And thank you guys for tuning into this week's episode of the WRPF podcast.